sustainable food and farming. We promote sustainable farming, we educate people about it, but also we educate people about sustainable food production. Today I will moderate this panel. We will talk about sustainable farming and the trends that we have been observing, as well as what we can expect in the next few years. Adam Baucza is the head of Terra Nostra, a foundation for agricultural development, at Frontczak, the head of carbon farming heavy finance, and a representative of Nowa, a foundation, and Anna Gałązka, representing Puławach, to be exact, a National Research Institute specializing in soil studies and fertilization, and to be even more exact, agricultural biology. Yesterday, we talked a lot about this ongoing situation, the situation that we've had for some time now. It is linked to the Green Deal. So, sustainable farming, how it can develop. When we discuss it, we can show why this is the right direction to choose, but also which challenges we might expect in the next few years. So, sustainable farming, what is it really? The environmental aspect is stressed, but we have this environmental factor, it's true. We have the economic factor, that is the profitability, but also it needs to be socially acceptable. So we need to discuss whether this is the right direction. We need to have these discussions in various milieus, in various communities. What is it linked to? We need to remember that we have inherited this conventional farming model that prevailed in the 20th century. It is profit-oriented, and it stems from the fact that we had to feed a growing population. It degraded our soils, this style of farming, but also was conducive to climate change. In other words, on the one hand, farming is conducive to climate change, but at the same time, it is the victim of said climate change. And thus, we need to adapt to this change and to use the situation to our benefit. So, the shift to sustainable farming needs to be properly compensated. Today, we will talk about the models that this sustainable farming offers, but also we will talk about business models that are related to it. In other words, what other options are there, out there? Anna, let us begin with you. A question. Regeneration practices, what are they? What does it mean that we regenerate soil? What are the limitations? We can use these practices to prevent or to mitigate climate change, but also it makes us less sensitive to said climate change. Anna, would you please tell us more? Hello, thank you. First, let me highlight the fact that it is about keeping profitability. When it comes to sustainable farming and regenerative practices, all too often we begin at the wrong place. We want to limit costs. Certain practices early on in the first few years in a farm, we can introduce a certain balance things out, because there are certain factors that can disturb our productivity. Our soils are too acidic at this point. There is too little humus. This is what we have observed. So, we need to remember that we need to be profitable. Regenerative practices are important in this regard. We do not want to be barbaric in our soil treatment. We need to preserve the cover throughout the year. This is the perfect approach. Yes, you have this traditional style of fertilization, chemical compounds based, and we can learn about it more in other panels. But the thing is, there are a number of websites that discuss that. Still remember, all farms are different. What we do, we work with farmers, we are close to the soil, we try to find an economic business model that will make it possible for a farmer to change their ways and remain profitable. Oftentimes, it means a completely different approach to the farm. It is about diversification, also about diversifying one's production. And an example here, 10 hectares, 1,000 hectares, you may generate the same profit out of those two completely different in size farms. So quite often we start in the wrong place, and often people begin with things that are quite controversial and difficult. We have Facebook websites, it's a whole service, and I read comments there, and people misread what the practices are all about. They misunderstand them. There is a document that covers how shall I say it, about taking this more biological-oriented approach. And there is a way that can change things. 70 to 20% bigger yield only because you have changed pH properly. Because then, if the pH is right, plants can use whatever is in the soil better. So what I mean is liming. It is very important. Also, there is too little education activities. And as we sit here, this is exactly what we do. We work with farmers on an everyday basis. We have introduced certain polls at our Facebook website. Tens of thousands of people follow us. And there are three things that are very important for farmers today. Because basically, remember that we are talking about to be or not to be of a given farm. And remember, a farm is about real people, about a family that needs to stay afloat. So what you need is an advisor that has been through it all, that has experienced all possible scenarios. So they need to have actual real-life experience. Also, another important thing is you need to have the so-called lighthouse or a role model sort of farm that could be tapped into for knowledge, for experience. When there are issues, you need to be able to call a friend, a colleague, and solve a problem on the spot rather in a month's time. And the third important criterion is money. Remember about it. In some countries, you have competitions where the focal point is how beautifully the field looks like rather than how efficient it is. Ania Gałązka, a question to you. Regenerative farming, these regenerative farming practices, what do they give us? I mean, in the context of soil health, biodiversity, and how better to use nutrients. Carbon farming is another name for this notion. It is something that allows you to capture carbon and keep it in the soil. But I understand that you could tell us more about the academic and scientific aspect of things. I represent an research institute that focuses on soil. We have been providing advice, consulting. Now, Anna has raised a number of issues, and they are very close to what we do. Farmers need to be profitable. What they do needs to be profitable. More and more, you hear how important the quality of the soil is. It's a whole chunk of environment. So the soil needs to be biologically, microbiologically active. It needs to be diverse. And this aspect has been more pronounced. My colleague has mentioned a number of practices. Those practices are aimed at making enzymes more active in the soil, about boosting the microbial activity in the soil. Yesterday, actually, that was discussed at length. Various products have this microbiological component. Soil is a living organ, you might say. What you have in the soil are a number of different organisms. There is this rich fauna there. They are active and they are important, and their activity is important in the context of soil health. So we are talking about carbon farming, sustainable farming. Basically, it is one and the same thing. And what the common denominator here is the health of the soil. A farmer needs to know its pH, its makeup. They need to know all that so as to add to the soil whatever is missing. You need to use organic fertilization and mineral fertilization. You need to be rational about it. That is, you need to have proper dosage. You need to make it appropriate for a given plant, the right season, and so on and so forth. Liming is also important. So you need to keep the right pH level. The microbiological activity is very important, especially when you have neutral pH. When you have acidic soils, liming is incredibly important. The same is true about alkalic soils. You have to lower your pH so that you reach the neutral pH. Also, you have a number of different practices. You need to want to preserve the organic matter in the soil because the humus is often insufficient in quantity. But all that relies on biological activity. It is these organisms that are responsible for important processes that lead to the creation of humus. Also, what you need to remember about is to find certain replacements for mineral fertilizers. You've got bioproducts of various sorts. Since 2022, we have been looking at microbiological fertilizers. What are they? You've got microorganisms as a part of the makeup of such a fertilizers. They can do a number of things. They can bind nitrogen, various forms of nitrogen. Also, another thing, mineral fertilization needs to be compensated for because microorganisms can actually step in and do it. Phosphorus is something that microorganisms can help you with. So phosphorus fertilization can also be, to some extent, compensated for or replaced by that type of biological approach.
So then we have introduction of the right sequence of plants and then increasing the share of certain plants, then to provide the right volume of nitrogen, and the plant can draw nitrogen from that. So there are so many different methods used in farming, and we've been evaluating these concepts, and we introduce certain methodologies and assess them in order to recommend them for practical application in farming. As I mentioned, there are quite many practical applications, but it's all for soil to be fertile and resourceful and rich in the necessary nutrients that can be then made available to plants. Well, acidification of soil, where this is an important issue here. More than 64% of soil in Poland is heavily or are heavily acidified. So at the European level, it's important to emphasize the fact that we have the soil strategy, and then we have the strategy for biodiversity. These strategies mention regenerative practices, and that is based on the sustainable goals. And one of these goals is live on the land. So desertification and preventing desertification is one of the factors that is important here. So my question to Adam is, what are the key trends in developing that model of farming? Do you think that farmers and business could benefit from this direction, or is it the only direction? Well, the buzzword regenerative farming, sustainable farming, well, they have been mentioned quite a bit here. Let us look at farming at large. We have farmers in this room, and I would say that 100% of them, they are all regenerative farmers. So the activities, well, what they do on their fields, well, it is sustainable, regenerative. Everyone would like to have fertile soil and soil that produces high volumes of yield. With that, we need to help introduce a certain structure, system, so that things can be even more improved, that could lead to higher efficiencies. The goal is to have higher yield from crops. The more fertile, the more nourished soil is, then us consumers will benefit from it. So we have just one concept of agriculture, and agriculture should feed us all with the lowest, smallest, tiniest adverse impact on the environment. Agriculture should be aware of why, how, and if. So we spoke yesterday about the education, which is lacking from the start. We live in a bubble. We basically believe in certain truths, like application of certain types of fertilizers. Well, I think we're past the stage. We should have this right approach to fertilization. We should bear in mind that these microorganisms, that life well, all that is there to help. So a farmer should avoid preventing these microorganisms from working, and the industry should benefit from that. Well, unfortunately, there are some bottom-up initiatives which remain unseen, which remain invisible. We should make everyone aware of how important a farmer is in this chain of production. 80% of the produce supplied by farmers to the mill or to food processing plants, these are goods directly supplied by farmers. So the farmer is the key element here to speak in the context of emissions. And we should bear in mind that emissions and everything that is happening around agriculture, well, all that should lead to certain conclusions, to certain manifestations. Well, we have certain natural phenomena, and all that will contribute to alleviating that negative adverse impact on the environment. The industry may, can, and should benefit from that and take advantage of these solutions. So we have emissions, and we have that impact on the environment, the impact on the biodiversity, the impact on the consumption of water and other resources. Well, these are key factors. Now the question is about how to engage farmers. And the question is, how can industry join that concept and that movement? Well, the industry has this one important set of tools, which is indispensable, and that is money. So it's about the industry, it's about food processing plants. We need this awareness of how important farmers and food production is. Right. So you mentioned emissions. Quite many aspects of that have been mentioned. So we spoke about regenerative practices, and in the strategic plan, we have that carbon farming concept. These are typically regenerative practices. These are not carbon credits. Sometimes we hear some information on that which does not present the right picture of the things. And there are some solutions on the market. These solutions come from Canada and from the USA. There are certain standards that apply. Companies may sell carbon credits, and farmers may also benefit from that and trade it. Well, we have sustainable carbon cycles, and we are very much looking forward to that and to such carbon certificates. So my question goes to Eryk now. We have these direct applications of carbon reduction. So it's about reducing emissions in farms, also through binding carbon in soil at a larger scale. My question is about the benefit of that model for farmers. Well, I believe that carbon farming is the answer that Adam was looking for. So these are tools supporting farmers financially. And these tools may have a positive impact on the natural environment. Let us think about Poland. We have about 10 million hectares with the sequestration potential of about 20 million tons. And then depending on the type of soil, there are different carbon binding potentials. But actually, we're talking about a huge area which could be turned into low emission areas owing to Polish farmers, because there are some technologies that can bind that oxygen in soil and carbon in soil. Well, first, let us not forget that a farmer is a small or medium-sized entrepreneur. And farmers are quite susceptible to market turmoils. Nowadays, markets are very volatile. Farmers must look for sources of income, for sales opportunities, and there are some elements of risk. So all farmers do, well, that must be connected with direct financial benefits or financial income. So in brief, farming engages practices which are directly oriented towards binding that carbon in soil, and issue of carbon certificates. Well, that would be a direct award or reward to farmers for removing these emissions. So that would go to every farmer with carbon binding potential. We spoke about it yesterday. We spoke about farms. We spoke about agricultural enterprises with farmers assisting in measuring carbon footprint. We need to keep on collecting data. We need to be aware that there could be potential greenwashing involved, so we must proceed with caution. So we should be looking for solutions in the value of in the chain of values at farmers. So my question goes to Anna Gałązka. How about the yield from crops grown on such soil? My question is about economics of running a farm. So is that profitable at all? Well, I think it's simple and straightforward. We have certain type of resource which is shrinking. And over the past 10 years, we lost about 30% of soil globally in terms of yield. And in Poland, we have been also seeing desertification of soil. And with that, we have a major growth of the population that we need to feed. Now, when we look at the global trends, we can see that over the next 10 years, we'll have to welcome more people on the same territory. So limited resources and growing needs, well, all that translates into a higher yield and higher profit from each fertile hectare. Well, I would like to avoid sketching such dark and gloomy scenarios, even after 3 years of practices. Last week, with a group of 10 students of farming with a great international team, we were working in the fields that have been subject to we have been measuring outcrops and comparing the type of crop, such as rape, such as clover. And I'm not talking here about farmers who operate on small acreage. I'm talking about large farms and farmers who've been working hard in the past 10 years on improving the yield from crops. So we struggle to restore the condition of homeostasis of the soil. We have learned only a small part about the small part of all processes which are ongoing, and hopefully with the support of the artificial intelligence we can continue with these processes and studies. Hopefully with our support, with the scientific support that comes from discoveries and inventions, we can proceed. What I'm often amazed at when looking at foreign practices, and this is what I would expect in Poland too, is to start from an Excel sheet. It is to start from budgeting, balancing costs and income, and looking at perspective. I don't think we have sufficient climate-related education. The most recent climate map, which is now being in production, is measuring the relationship between precipitation and other aspects, such as pairing. Vaporization and precipitation relationship changed to 13% when it comes to precipitation, and then apparently we are losing very important type of resource here. You touched upon a very important topic. So we should start from scratch, and that scratch is an Excel sheet in order to calculate emissions, to provide some evidence, some tangible evidence to industry. We need some data, some tangible data that we don't have. In farming, we do not have the basic data to be able to calculate the emissions. In general, we use some ad hoc notes and we fill out our crop sheet once per year, but that is insufficient data to speak about carbon sequestration, about reduction of consumption, to speak about sustainable carbon farming. We need to have a reference point. To speak about carbon binding in soil, I need to have quite detailed calculations of the volume of carbon in field. How often do you analyze and test your soil for carbon? Every 3, every 4 years. Well, this frequency is insufficient. I need to have more updated results. How can I make a decision on the basis of results that go back 3 or 4 years? Farmers make decisions about procurement of plant protecting chemicals, about pesticides, etc. We need knowledge about our impact on the vegetational season with all our practices, with all our activity in every field.
I need to know what I've done. Have I improved the situation? Maybe I've improved the health of the soil. Maybe I have improved the soil parameter. It's better balanced. It's more effective. So maybe now I could limit my fertilization. But to do that, I need to take stock. I need to do it more often. Industry will not give you the money because you smile nice. No, you need evidence. So we are talking about reducing emissions when you grow your crops, be it wheats or something else, but you need to be able to prove the level of your emissions. You cannot rely on something that has been calculated at one university or another, because it is somebody else's emissions, somebody else's calculations. You need to make these calculations by yourself. Maybe a single database for farmers could help. That or a tool. It needs to be simple enough to help any farmer so that they can present evidence. You can prove by showing samples, soil samples that you have taken annually. It is not that costly. Soil sampling is an investment, not a cost. You may spend, 100 to 100 zlotys for taking a sample, but then you will save 10% in fertilizer. It is even incomparable. It does pay off. To change anything, you need to take an informed decision. It's not about what you feel. You need evidence. You need Excel sheets. You need to take notes that you can look at. Emissions can be estimated. Many farms already do that, and Anya has been showing that. They've been functioning in this way, regenerative year, for years. But you can look at the numbers, look at hard data, and point to the moments when it actually worked. Was it after a year in a given farm, or 2 or 5 years? When did it actually benefit you so that you could spend less? To do that, you need evidence, you need data first. You need to learn that. Soon, we farmers will be expected to present this data. No food producer, no industry player will be able to assess the level of their emissions without us, our data, the data generated by farmers. And we would like to take this first step. We farmers need to be ready. We need to be ready because the industry will approach us quite soon. And then I will say, here I am. I'm ready. I've got the evidence. This is what I'm producing. I've got the data. I can actually provide you with evidence why the emissions are what they are. It shouldn't be just something that has been imposed by somebody else, by Brussels. No, we need to motivate ourselves because it's something that we need. To change anything at all, I need to consult my data from 3 years back and see what impact a given change has had. If it's worked, great. If it hasn't, maybe I can change something else. But I always need data. Profitable farming needs planning. Also, when it comes to some plants, you've got potatoes, for example. There you also have another factor that is storage. And I need to know in advance whether I should produce potatoes because this production is very costly. If I take this decision, it needs to be an informed decision. It should not be an ad hoc decision because if I know that maize is in vogue, so everybody's producing maize. But if I follow suit, I know that I'm not going to make much money, because it's going to be cheap. So we want to make farming more sustainable, regenerative. This is the first step on the road to get there. We've been hearing about it for some time, and farmers have been finding it difficult. There are certain solutions available in the market. There are even companies and experts that help to get there. So education is necessary. Anna, you have wanted to add something. But first you need to know what to test. Sometimes it is not that easy. We have some projects that we run together with the partners from the Netherlands. So some things are not that easy to carry out. So what we do, we take samples, we send them to the Netherlands, we get results from there. Education is the precondition. Even if a farmer wants to act without education, it's going to be harder. Yes, because everybody wants to act, true, but you need support. You need people who are going to give you some advice. English is an obstacle because in Polish you don't have sufficient reliable sources. And Horizon Live, there are programs that have been generating information. The thing is, so we are somewhat ahead of time to some extent. Imagine that you've got an Excel given to a farmer, you can see benefits, and many people say, why? This amount is not going to cover what I need to do. It makes no sense. So the practice itself doesn't seem meaningful to many. The way I see it, there are certain measuring tools, but they are secondary. First, I need to know why and what I want to test. John Kemp has a nice podcast. He speaks about regenerative farming. He's been doing that for years. He's an icon because he also covers profitability. You can listen to that. And they focus on different parameters. You look at the plants because it's the plant that manages the whole thing, not the soil. So in terms of education, you can see that things are basically upside down. You know, it's putting the cart before the horse. There are these items, and we do things that are habitual but make no sense. Meteo stations, hardly anyone actually taps into that. And sometimes you can take two actions rather than four, because certain activities are not necessary. Also, you can use a microbiological product that will protect plants from infections. Also, different infections and different pests appear. At this point, we cannot do it well. The vegetative season is extended by 8 years. You've got droughts too, and you've got floods. And that impacts profitability. So you have to be very precise in what you do. To begin with, you need to prepare yourself. You need to prepare simple tools. And there is some software that is generally available, but this type of software is simply too hard. You know, when you are in high school or later, you don't use this software. It's difficult to introduce it in your farming practice. Because it would be better to learn it when you are still getting your education so that you can use it later in your practice. Yes, tools are important. Software is important. But people think that these are, a few more boxes or fields that they have to fill in. But it is not supposed to be a burden. It's supposed to be helpful. It is about helping you to take proper informed decisions. When it comes to this business model, you get also an upside. You get access to your own data. Otherwise, you wouldn't be motivated to collect this info. I mean, crop rotation, summary, fertilization information. Happy Finance is a company I work for. We support farmers in getting official certificates, carbon generation. And industry requires such certification. They want things measured. And then a farmer can use all that to the best of their ability so that they benefit too. We've been working with certain farmers. They give data back. They know about, the humus content, the level of precipitation. They are very much interested in this information, this data. This data helps them to be more informed and better to run their business. But every farm is different. A question, how do you compare these data? Should you have separate criteria for different farms? But how do you do that? We want comparability, we want competitiveness. I think that this is an issue. It is not a problem. You have certain data input standards. There are certain ISO standards that regulate it, that try to introduce some structure there. You need to take the right approach. Yes, every farm is different, but data should have a single form because we use similar equipment and we all use phosphorus-based fertilizers or nitrogen-based fertilizers. These are things that we have in common. It's already there. So we do not have to demolish everything and build things from scratch. No, we need to take the things and tools that are already available. We can choose one that is the most friendly to farmers so that you can aggregate data in a single database. It shouldn't be generally available. Farmers complain, if I input the data, somebody else will use this data, I'm on solutions. No, that's not the point. I want to be able to show off, to show that my products are more competitive, that they are better produced. This is the point. We are in a global market. We know what's happening in the market. There is a lot of mess, but we want to be competitive. We want to sell. We can never compete on cost with the players on the other side of our eastern border. No, we need to set ourselves apart, to show that we provide quality so that people do not shop elsewhere. But for that, we need aggregated data. The form needs to be consistent. It needs to help the farmers and the processing industry and the industry as such. A company or institution also will be able to help because they can help you to sell whatever you have. For example, carbon credits linked to your soil. We need this aggregated data, and this is where development begins. This is the first step. You need to collect data in a systematic manner. And we need to know who are active farmers. We know the number of farmers, officially 1,400,000. But I believe only 400,000 or so are actual active farmers that make a living by producing things in those farms and supporting the families out of these farms. So we need to work together with a number of ministries and with Brussels to actually do it well. We have been speaking about diversification quite a lot, so a question to Anna. Profitability in the context of diversification and microbiological products. Could you please tell us more about the benefits that you have when you use them? It is not only about the money, but also about the environment that benefits. Yes, the environmental benefits are very important. I'll follow up on what you said before, the information flow and the cooperation between the academia and farming practitioners. It's not as good as it could be, although there's been improvement. Scientific institutes, universities, they conduct research and they take the data that stems from it and introduce into general circulation. There are also special models, experimental models, and practitioners, farmers, are invited so that they can learn about any given method or solution that's been used and applied and tested. But we find this player that would bring other players together. It's missing. Because we, the academics, the researchers, we cooperate with farming advisors, we invite entrepreneurs, we try to communicate, and yet this communication is not as good as it could be. And we would like this knowledge, this information better to be disseminated. Also, there is a decreasing number of farming schools. Farming has not been fashionable for some time, and now it is coming back. To answer your question, you spoke of microbiologicals or any products that aim to improve the quality of the soil. Mind you, only some products have this microbiological component. Sometimes you've got amino acids, you've got humus, growth stimulators, growth agents are added to those products. So you've got microbiologicals, but also a whole line of other products that are supposed to positively impact the soil. Does it pay? Is it financially beneficial? I believe so. It's not only about boosting the yield, but also boosting the quality of the yield. The quality of the product will be better. You will have a higher protein content if you use them. Coming back to the microbiological activity in the soil, it all translates into the soil, but also into the crops, the yields. The plants will simply operate better, certain processes will work better, and yields will be also better. And we might compare mineral fertilization with microbiologicals on price. What do we see then?
Well, it's difficult to quote just one determining factor. We should avoid going towards total replacement of the existing product with products with microorganisms. It's about reasonable fertilization with mineral components. Microbiological components or products are to supplement it and to activate certain biological processes in soil which are inhibited. Well, that is to stimulate the microbiological life. We want soil to be in the best and active condition. for the future. And as I mentioned, we have a whole array of microorganisms and fungi introduced into these microorganisms by binding nitrogen, by secretion of certain hormones or growth factors. And it was also about inhibiting certain plant pathogens. And it's about improving the very structure of the soil. And there are certain reasons that create a certain knot, full of knot structure of the soil. Would that generate a higher yield on crops? I believe so, because every type of activation would generate some economic benefits, both for the condition of the soil and for the crops. It is important to convey the information about the products in the right way. Obviously, the necessary information is on packaging. Farmers, though, tend to be quite suspicious and quite skeptical about the information given by producers. So I think this is the role of science, to support the information, to increase the rank of the information. This is how we validate results of our research. We should care about the fertility of our soil by activating that microenvironment. We have few minutes of this panel left. These regenerative practices occupy a very high position on the agenda of many strategies. It's not only about the SGO. So the important question right now is about conveying the message to those who sell it and those who buy it. How to convince them that such preparations, such methods and measures are profitable. How to share our knowledge. Anna. Right. Perhaps Anna can add to that, and then we'll move to other panels and questions. As for food producers, I think all entities that are directly in touch with farmers receive many questions. So by 2030, all these entities must have about 100% of regenerative farmers with the right emission balance. And then we are often invited as consultants. And we continue working on other factors such as water and biodiversity. So most likely we will be producing two other credits which are less measurable. Yesterday, me and Eryk, we had this interesting discussion about measurability of certain criteria. Well, the criteria that we measure for now, these are estimations. In my opinion, we will not come up with a big database. And according to the latest trends on the carbon credit market, that was the British emission of 2024, credits are going to have different quality levels, better and of lower quality. We are only at the beginning of that process. If you go to a farmer in Poland and ask directly about these carbon credits, I think some farmers would just believe that these are some direct payments for heating purposes. So these are my concerns, that at the right time we failed to communicate our objectives. Then, if we combine and connect the goals of the criteria of these companies that need to have that result by 2030 with farmers, we need to work from scratch with every farm. we need to have more people who can do that. There are quite many companies for now that would gladly lease their hectares to farmers so they could learn from them. And I agree that those who do not have full picture, they require some technical support. And it's quite difficult to jump into deep water. I think very few people here would agree or decide to start with this new project, where the connection between business and science, well, that has accelerated. But there are certain practices that we can use and apply over 1 year. And then we have certain practices with which we start from scratch. We analyze the type of crops which are worth growing on a certain type of soil. And with all that, farmers learn that it profits to have that spread over a larger acreage. In business, there are funds, there are many sources of funds to support farmers. When farmers promise to limit their own emissions and they can receive support, and there are certain businesses that create such carbon credits. In my opinion, though, we have quite outdated method of notifying and informing farmers about the connection between emissions and the carbon tickets. We need that ABC approach. We need this approach that would offer a very simple method. I do not expect the members of the academia to work on that. It's not the role. People have done great research. We have access to knowledge. And now this is the right time to start with the micro-learning. And I get results of soil analysis, and I can see certain deficiencies in plants, and I get yield at a great level, and I get a film of like a 3-minute video presenting and explaining what could have gone wrong in my crops, in my method. In Germany, there are some solutions, there are some systems like Solbit. All the data is compiled in one software. Then farmers receive short videos, and these short videos answer the key question: what can be done about that? One thing is to get research results or test results, but these results must be interpreted. We have about 2% of the people who can interpret data. So we should focus on cascading our training. We have funds for that. We should streamline all the procedures, no matter whether it's about liming, no matter it's about educating farmers in acquisition of financial tools. Well, this is another field because the economic education, business education of farmers is non-existent. We shouldn't blame these hard-working, very active people for that. Well, I think it's very difficult to be a farmer right now because you need to be a jack of all trades, and no one can do it in a responsible manner. Well, I think cloning would be one way to go about that. So perhaps we could be training farmers, but then we could also offer a system of external consultants. Krzysztof Gawęcki said yesterday during his debate that in farming, according to EU estimations, We have about 4% of the population. And we should be aware that our work is that important, where the 4% of people should feed the remaining 98%. And this is what we do. We have to produce, well, generate food. We have to feed all of you from field to fork. So we must have this awareness. We need to go out there. We need to try new methods. We need to try and change things. So if we are to talk about sustainable regenerative development, we need to reach that stage in our mind that we say, well, from now on, let me change my method. I might look for an expert. I might look for textbooks or manuals or instruction videos. In our channel, we have quite many videos presenting different approaches to soil testing. On our YouTube, we have recordings from conference with experts from the US they came to Poland and they started explaining what is important, what should we start with. So let us look for different institutions, let us look for practitioners. The number of regenerative farms is growing. And let's draw from their experience and let's dwell on it. Because, well, the best case scenario is when we want to be as good as our neighbor. So we need to share knowledge, and we have farms in Poland that can do it. We need to reach them also through an institution like ours. We should not be afraid to go to these people, to talk about their production. Well, I think our time is up. I'm very grateful for your answers. I think we have one question from the floor. Thank you. I have this very short question.
How many farms are there like that? We have some farms that have been applying that solutions. You can take a horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. So the question is, how many farms have been taking in all this knowledge and experience? Do you have any information on the numbers? You are telling us about beautiful research. I also work in science. I do research, and I know how difficult it is to pass on this knowledge, this information that you've uncovered. So you've got these lofty things, but the question is, how many farms have been applying these practices? So, when it comes to those that are role models that you can learn from, I believe there are dozens of them. I'm not even sure that there are hundreds of them. Let me butt in. When it comes to proper role model farms that have been doing that for 10 years, maybe we could have 100, maybe 200. There are many that we don't know about. But there are many that are in the process. You can look at a number of factors. For example, the type of equipment that is necessary to do this form of farming. What else can you look at? You can look at various programs that finance this reduced tillage farming. And statistical sampling. You can ask people, you can ask them, you can poll them. And this would mean 10 to 15%. You could talk about intercrops, who uses those, or reduced tillage, who uses that, who uses satellite imaging, who uses precision fertilization and some refuse to use fertilization at all. Mind you, even our Swiss experts say that to begin with, you do need certain dosage, and then you monitor and add something when it's necessary. But farms tend not to share it for two reasons. Eryk has mentioned that. Imagine that you have one such farmer in a given village, and many of his neighbors will consider him insane because they don't understand him. We are spraying and he's not. I visited this large regenerative farm in the Netherlands. They lease some of the land, and some of the land is farmed conventionally because the owner doesn't want any other kind of farming. 8 years, this is how long they've been producing potatoes in two styles, regenerative and traditional. And they had rainfall, 3 weeks. So the traditional crops, potato crops, looked very profitable. But the thing is, after this rainfall, the traditionally farmed potato basically drowned, while the new approach worked. Yes, the economic aspect is quite important. We've been cooperating with farms that are responsible for 100,000 hectares altogether. So you will always find somebody within the radius of a few dozen kilometers. You'll always find a farm that has been on that path for a few years, that are in the process. I suggest one more question, because we are already delayed. If I may add. I sow rape in August, wheat in September, and the minister will tell me how many hectares I was supposed to lie fallow last year, and whether I'm supposed to plant something else or not. 2, there is this canal, and there is water table there higher than elsewhere. And the thing is that locks are being removed. So we could allow water to flow in the ditches, but it's not allowed because it would take 2 years to get a permit. What about a pump? There is a special program. No, we're not going to give you a pump. No, you could dig a well and have a special irrigation system, but it's going to cost millions. We might rebuild this lock, but it would cost 20 to 30,000, but we're not allowed to do that. So maybe talk to the decision makers, point it to them. Because people say that farmers don't want to do things, but, it's easy to say these things. I'm just interested. What kind of profitability you had last year from hectare? There are special experimental farms, model farms. We have our own advisors. Jung also operates the way you do. So last year's profitability, we were in the red last year. We know what the grain prices are like. We know that fertilizers got more expensive. Our institute is not privileged when it comes to farming practices. We follow the same rules, it's the same playing field. Speaking of experience, We, as an institute, invite you to visit our fields, experimental fields, and they have been monitored for years. Physical and chemical properties were tested. We have all this information. We are disseminating all this information. There are no secrets here. You can simply reach out and you will learn what we know. So we do share this knowledge that we have. We, as farming practitioners, are facing the same issues that you are facing. Thank you very much. Thank you for this debate, for this conversation. I know that there are more questions, but you can discuss that during the break. Thank you to all the speakers. Join us for more panels and debates. Later, we will talk about the role of women in farming, which I believe is also a very important subject.